Good morning, friend. I've got a Michael J. Fox style body warmer on today because it's freezing here. It's 46 degrees here in Los Angeles. And I'm not used to this, you know? This is not in the brochure when I signed up for moving here. It was all like blue skies and palm trees, people in their bikinis, and here I am sitting in a Michael J. Fox style Back to the Future 1985 body warmer. It looks good, doesn't it? Yeah, it's like a life vest. They're quite slimming, these things, which is good because they kind of, they give you that kind of narrow. Anyway, I don't know why I'm getting into that. Good morning. Welcome to Backchannel. They called it Blackchannel just then. I don't know why. It just came out that way. You've got me till, 11 Pacific? I mean, we'll just keep going until someone else takes over. It's probably going to be Hal Rudnick. If I had to guess, that's who it's going to be. Backchannel is the only place you can go to listen and watch and chat with hosts of live shows right here on your device. If that's an Echo Show device, you can use it to chat back to your device. You just have to say the word, or whatever your wake-up word is, followed by say, and then your message. It comes straight through to me here. You can watch on YouTube as well and use the comments section. And you are also welcome to go on backchannel.tv. That's like a new little chat facility. You can put it on your browser, on your laptop, on your phone, and you can message the show during the show while the show is on. So that's kind of how it works. I'm Anthony Davis. It's the Anthony Davis Show. For a couple of hours, we're going to take a look through the morning newspapers, see what's happening. Topics will include the Louisiana judge, Michael Odinet, who says he has zero recollection of the episode captured on video in which off-screen voices are heard narrating security camera footage of a failed burglary attempt. It's so fun. We'll take a look at that story together. Also, The Atlantic's David Frum doubles down on a claim that the unvaccinated should be treated last in hospitals. What's your opinion on this? Is alfresco dining in New York City causing a rat explosion? And we'll also look at the life of dapper, self-styled Southern gentleman Colonel Sanders, who died on this day today in 1980 at the age of 90. I could really kill for Kentucky Fried Chicken right now. I haven't had breakfast. I just had a third of a banana that's past its sell-by date. So I'm not in a good place in terms of nourishment. And I've also put my back out, just getting out of bed. I did this weird leg over leg. That's all it was. I put one leg over the other leg for some reason. Instead of shunting out of bed like normal, put one leg over the other leg, like in a cartwheel scenario, and it twisted my core, put my back right out. Anyway, I've been on a hot pad this morning. I've got a couple of Motrin inside me. This is going to be one of those great days. Let's take a look at the front pages of the morning papers first, though. I really feel like that's our duty this morning. So let's jump on those and see, just kind of see how the world is looking. We'll start with Los Angeles. SAT, ACT, or none of the above, says California State University. The largest four-year university system in the nation is poised to drop the SAT and ACT as an admissions requirement. A move that would follow the University of California's elimination of the exams and further shake up the standardized testing landscape as hundreds of campuses across the nation shift away from the assessments. That can only be a good thing, right? I mean, that can only be a good thing. I'm not a fan of, testing people. I'm not a fan of overeducating people. I'm not a fan of pitting people against each other. I'm not a fan of competition. I think everybody should be treated equally and individually. Does that make sense? To be equal, but also individual at the same time. That's what I believe. Yeah. I myself left school at 16. I'm completely uneducated. I never went to college. I never went to university. Nobody in my family went to university, apart from my sister, who went for about 3 months and then dropped out. She didn't enjoy herself. I literally am from a family of uneducated grifters, and we've all done okay, Because I really feel like if you have a good radar, then that's really all you need. A good radar. And I used to tell people to get elocution lessons because that was, in England, if you spoke nicely, then you were treated differently. So if you had a nice voice, then you could get better jobs. So I'd say just, spend a few $100 on elocution lessons, and also get some nice shoes. And I really think the combination of the shoes and the elocution lessons and having a good radar, as in like being streetwise, is the secret to success. Now I'm back to another Michael J. Fox movie, The Secret of My Success. Do you remember that film? Where he started off as the postal boy, and there was an empty office upstairs when he was delivering, and he knew that he could run the company better. So he had this double life where he would do his mail round really quickly, and then he would change clothes, get into the office and start making deals. Such a great film with Helen Slater. That's true, actually. The great entrepreneurs. I mean, Richard Branson was always one of my favorites because he was one of the great British. And he's very dyslexic. And, also, I mean, he did go to college because, of course, he started the Virgin record label when he was at college with Tubular Bells, the Mike Oldfield, because Mike Oldfield was like a kid in college with him. And that's how he started the Virgin record label, was with Mike Oldfield. He had this idea. Mike Oldfield did the music for The Exorcist. So he was like hanging out with Mike Oldfield, and he was like, well, I'll be your manager. I'll just start a record label. And they called it Virgin because it was his first time, And the rest, as they say, is mystery. You see, this knowledge, knowing this complete random stuff, is the University of Life. They don't teach this in college. They never would have said that Mike Oldfield was friends with Richard Branson in school. They never would have done it. And people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, I mean, these people were dropouts. Look at Steve Jobs, arguably the greatest mind of the modern day. And the guy was, he had his own, he was building computers in his mum's garage with Steve Wozniak from the age of 16. That's how it started. You don't need to go to college. I mean, it's nice if you want to meet girls and boys. That's really what it's for. Learning how to make out and hide from the authorities. I can't see what else it brings you, unless you are very academic and you're going to go into one of the professional professions. You're going to be a teacher or a doctor or a lawyer or something where you kind of know that that's your calling, because some people are not streetwise and some people need to be educated in the same way that some people need to be religious and follow a belief system, because they themselves don't bring that kind of direction to the table. So they feel the need to be part of a tribe. And that's totally acceptable too. Stacey, good morning. Nice to know that you're here, she says. Are you ready for your lunch hour with me? Stacey, I've never been more ready. Iraq's war generation, a bleak future awaits teens raised amid death and chaos. It says, the story out of Baghdad this morning. He was 9 years old and needed a pencil. He ran down the roads to a shop on the corner. He knew the neighborhood, the familiar faces. His friend was the shop owner's son. But what Amir Jui did not know was the man sitting outside in the car was an Islamic State suicide bomber. The ground shook, the car was hurled into the air. Shrapnel scythed in all directions, turning the intersection into a tangle of perforated corpses and singed flesh. A placard of a cleric shielded Amir from the blast. He lived. The shop owner's son didn't. Another child foiled in the carnage of a Baghdad afternoon. Wow. He was 9 years old when that happened, still covered in the scars. This is really the thing about Iraq and Afghanistan, of course, which is now under the control of the Taliban, and they seem to have regaled on all of their promises to be they said we've changed. It's like getting back with a boyfriend, isn't it, I've changed. I promise you it's going to be different this time. Nah, people don't change. They might be able to do a little work on themselves, but fundamentally, people don't change. And that's really the tragedy of this whole story about the Middle East, isn't it? That these kind of decades-long wars, well, longer in many cases, they will just continue. I was thinking yesterday about those fake peace agreements that Donald Trump brokered. Do you remember? He called them the Abraham agreements. Do you remember? They were he basically brokered half a dozen fake peace deals with countries in the Middle East that didn't really have a problem with each other before, but he knew full well that Americans didn't really know anything about the Middle East. So when he moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, he at the same time brokered these peace deals, and they're all garbage. But the thing that was interesting about them, they were just like for a photo opportunity, because he actually said the phrase, I have cured Middle East peace. Because he wanted a Nobel Peace Prize. That's why he did it. He was desperate for the Nobel Peace Prize. Didn't realize that these things take a lifetime of analysis and study. He didn't even read them. But what I thought was really interesting was that he named them the Abraham Agreements. It's so offensive. It's actually like really quite prejudiced and racist. The whole thing is just an absolute charade. That's interesting. Iraq, being one of the oldest countries in the world, was the site of the first ever written legal code, as in a script, like in England, I guess we have the Magna Carta. That would be an equivalent, I guess. America, obviously, you have the Constitution. But in terms of like where on the planet, the first place to write down a structure, social structure, Iraq. And now look at it. Absolutely devastated by Western bombs. Anyway, I was just thinking about the Abraham Agreements, because, all this stuff's coming out about Trump now and the coup. And to me, this is all part of it. Very interesting story about Jim Jordan today. And if you're aware of this, he, the senator who basically on the 5th of January sent a text message to Mark Meadows explaining how to actually activate the coup. They all knew. They were all in on it. And Jim Jordan, who is one of the worst people on the planet, is now very much at the center of this desire to overturn the election and bring down the government of the United States. Nothing will happen to him. Nothing. Because he's a white man and he's rich. He was involved in a scandal. He was like a gym instructor or something, wasn't he? He turned a blind eye to abuse at the school where he worked. That's his backstory. He turned a blind eye. There was all this child abuse going on at the school, and Jim Jordan, it is well reported, knew and turned a blind eye. That's his backstory. Of course, he denies it, but there's evidence. Like a whole bunch of kids that say that he knew, He was protecting a colleague rather than the kids that he was paid to look after. Excuse me. Okay, also on the front of the LA Times, this is very interesting. Less from the Colorado, it says, California, Arizona, Nevada to cut water use. It says trying to stave off dangerously low levels of water in Lake Mead. Officials in California, Arizona, and Nevada have reached an agreement to significantly reduce the amount of water they take from the Colorado River. The problem took on new urgency in the summer when the federal government declared a first-ever water shortage in the 86-year-old reservoir near Las Vegas. The agreement, which was signed on Wednesday after 4 months of negotiations, aims to keep an extra 1 million acre-feet of water in the lake over the next 2 years. Water agencies in Southern California, Arizona, and Nevada agreed to find water savings from various sources and split the $200 million cost with the federal government. The Colorado River has been chronically overused, and its flows have shrunk dramatically over the last 22 years during a mega drought that research shows has been worsened by global warming. Interesting. It's so random. Yes. Jordan. Yeah. Oh, this is interesting. Producer Carla just told me that George Clooney, who I look a little similar to, so it's obviously difficult for me to say this without you getting a bit confused, is actually going to produce a docuseries for television about the abuse in Ohio that was ignored by Jim Jordan when he was working there as a teacher. How does a teacher that ignores child abuse become a US senator who's worth millions, who tries to overthrow the government and gets away with it? How does that happen? This is the thing that interests me about America, because in England, you really can't rise to the top that quickly. It's just not really possible. There's no channel for it. But for here, in America, it's so different. I mean, I'm fascinated by it. I mean, I guess the answer is money, isn't it? It's money. It's all money. Make the donations, support the cause, rise to the top. Can you believe it's the 16th of December already? It's insane. It's like, we're just, 9 days away from Christmas. I better get ordering some crap on Amazon that I don't need. I just need to get ordering. Last minute stuff. Took a few deliveries yesterday, but I do find that when I buy Christmas presents for people, a lot of the things I really just want for myself. Stuff arrives, I'm like, yeah, that's for me. Yeah, that's for me. That's for me as well. So yeah, the coincidence I was saying about the Colorado River is that I didn't know that so much of the water here in California comes from the Colorado River. I didn't know that. And randomly, my brother at dinner last night, because my sister's in town, and we met up last night for the first time. It was lovely to see her because she just basically is the same as us. My brother said, well, we were talking about Colorado randomly, and he's like, doesn't all the water for California come from Colorado? And so randomly we had that conversation last night, and here we are this morning, front page of the Los Angeles Times, a story about, federal officials declaring a first ever water shortage in Lake Mead. Who knew? Eva has joined us, Lee has joined us, Dennis is with us. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Stacey's having pizza with chips and a brownie. So, whatever you're eating, just let me know. Whatever you're eating, just let me know. Whatever it is, because I am particularly hungry this morning, so that's really going to feel great. Fed pivot signals faster rate hikes. This is with inflation now running at its fastest pace in nearly 40 years and showing no signs of slowing down. The Federal Reserve on Wednesday abandoned its wait-and-see strategy and indicated it could begin stepping on the economic brakes soon. Specifically, the central bank signaled it could start raising interest rates as early as next spring, as it announced a speedier shutdown of a bond-buying stimulus program that it implemented to counteract the economic damage from the COVID-19 pandemic. Most Fed officials now see at least 3 rate hikes in 2022. So if you're thinking of getting a mortgage or something, lock it in now, lock it in now. 3 firms charged in OC oil spill. Also on the front of the LA Times says a federal grand jury on Wednesday charged 3 companies with criminal negligence in connection with the oil spill that tarred the Orange County coast in early October. The 3-page indictment alleges that Amplify Energy Group and 2 subsidiary firms illegally discharged oil into federal waters from the pipeline that operated off of Huntington Beach. I mean, that was a huge oil spill. Huge. I remember them reporting on it at the time. It was like 100,000 gallons. It was putting 25 more than... Yeah, no, it was originally, that's right, they overstated it. They said it was 100,000 gallons, and it turned out to be 25,000 gallons. But it's still a lot of gallons. It's an awful lot of gallons. It was terrible. And that stretch of water is where people surf, and nobody could surf. Nobody could surf. Dinar, good morning. Yeah, I hate seeing birds covered in oil. I just hate seeing birds generally, I'll be honest. I'm one of those people that if I'm at the beach and like seagulls are kind of diving for you, I am terrified. Terrified. Anything, I'm not a natural really with the natural world. I love it and respect it, but I can't get involved. It's too scary for me. Okay, let's look at the San Diego Union Tribune this morning on this Thursday morning. San Diego students get COVID tests to take home. They're asked to test 3 days before returning and then again on their first day back. 97,000 students. This is interesting, actually. Yeah, do younger people take COVID more seriously than older people? Well, the attitude of a lot of older people, and older people also tend to be conservatives, and conservatives are getting their news from places that suggests that actually, coronavirus is nothing to worry about. So younger people who are more kind of activated, I think they care more because they recognize that, these days, because of climate change, I actually think we understand more the concept of collective responsibility. And I think that, previous generations never had to worry about stuff like that because they lived this charmed life where the economy kept growing and you could buy a house for $40,000. And nowadays it costs $1 million to buy a house. Wages never went up. I put economics at the core of all of our problems. Everything. Economics. I think it's a very good idea of San Diego Unified sending its students home with rapid COVID-19 tests this week. I mean, this is the interesting thing about, COVID testing in America. It's expensive. I mean, even if I've paid a few times for a COVID test because I needed a rapid test and it was before the insurance company would connect it in with it, and I paid $120, $160, which is crazy. And then they invented the home tests and the rapid tests, and I buy those for $24 plus tax for 2 tests, right? And I can't claim that back on the insurance. I have to pay for them. Well, my mum, who's just come over from England, has brought me several packs of National Health Service tests, packs of 10, because they're free in England. They give out testing kits for free to anybody who wants them. You just go online, they arrive 2 days later. We don't have to pay for our vaccines and our boosters, but our insurance company is making a profit, and the vaccine company is making a profit. So the federal government is covering the cost, but the vaccine companies are making an absolute killing. So in answer to your question, they are free at the point of issue, but there is huge sums being made. That's really the problem with the American system. The American healthcare, which is a bit of a contradiction in itself, there is no American healthcare. But healthcare in America was designed for profit, not for a pandemic. So of course, there's no methodology for making it free. No one is set up for that. Everyone's like, well, how do we charge for this? What do we charge? What category is this in? What code is this? Because everything's a code. You and I might call it a broken shoulder or a hip replacement. They call it C76941. That's how they can get remunerated. It's all done through the computer. And the concern is that in England, Omicron, America is about 3 weeks behind England in terms of infection rate and spread. That's kind of how it's worked now. They've worked that out. England is now pretty much into a full lockdown, boosting everybody, military on the streets. This has become a very serious thing. They know that Omicron is basically going to devastate the country. Well, wow. I mean, London apparently has seen more cases now with Omicron than at any time during the pandemic. Certainly since January last year. Wow. 23,000 Londoners tested positive in the last 24 hours. So they reckon the prediction is that January is when it's going to hit the US. If you're not boosted, consider getting boosted. Because they were saying yesterday that that's really the only way to combat the Omicron is to have your first, second, and third shots. Yeah, an American doctor said if you're waiting for some magical moment to get vaccinated, this is it. Yeah. Judy, hello. Danar, hello. Stacey says that's not necessarily true. What are we referring to, Stacey? I would love you to reiterate, and then we can have a conversation about it. Also, 4 more Omicron cases. Masks make comeback on the front of the San Diego Union Tribune this morning. It says the county health department announced 4 additional Omicron variant cases on Wednesday, bringing the region's total to 6, but providing scant additional details, declining to say whether any of the newly infected residents has gotten sick enough to be hospitalized. All 4 were said to have been fully vaccinated, but unlike the first 2 cases confirmed last week, none of them had received a booster shot. Age, city of residence, and gender of the latest cases were also not disclosed. The news came on the first day of the state's reborn masking requirement, which brought fresh questions about enforcement, even as some local leaders vowed that their cities will not police uncovered noses. Yeah. Fine. I mean, fine. Fine. This is just the way it's going to be. Mandates do not work in America, clearly, because people don't understand what freedom and liberty is. They don't understand that in order to experience or express your freedom and liberty, you need to not be dead. Okay, we're gonna look at this story a bit later, but this is off the back of a CNN anchor saying that if you're unvaccinated, then what was it? Then you shouldn't be. Oh, you'll be treated last. Yeah, that's right. Well, I don't know. I mean, they were trialing that in London for a while. Actually, they were saying that if you came in and you were drunk, if your injury was caused through alcohol, then you would be treated last, or they were going to charge you. Interesting, yeah. Smokers being treated last as well. Stacey says, oh, you're referring to the American medical system. What, that I said that it was designed for profit, not a pandemic? Well, I would love to talk more with you about that, because I'm going to stick with my version of that. Because, I'm yet to find... I mean, how much do you think my healthcare is? How much do I have to pay for healthcare here, for a family of 4? It's like we pay like nearly $1,300 or $1,400 a month for a family of 4. But the thing is, that's not paying for the healthcare. That's just paying to have the insurance. Because every time you go and see a doctor, you've still got to pay a copay. $40, $50, $60, $100, depending on who you're seeing. It's a racket. There is none of this needs to happen. Healthcare itself, the actual concept of health care, should be a non-profit concept. The fact that there are companies that make money out of the illnesses of other humans is so unjust in my view, and yet it is normalized in America. And for those of us who come from England, where we have socialized healthcare, where healthcare is free and everybody gets treated the same, it's just does not compute. And the thing is, you even have healthcare companies here that claim to be not-for-profit, like Kaiser and places like this. And that's also not true. They make a fortune. I mean, yes, you have Medicare and Medicaid, which are socialist constructs that have been in place for a long time, and even conservatives don't want to get rid of those. And then, of course, you have Obamacare, or otherwise known as the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, But again, you have to earn under a certain amount of money in order to qualify. So it's designed for people that can't afford to pay for healthcare through the private system. The other thing about English healthcare that I think Americans don't understand is that we also have the option to pay for private healthcare. So it's not like the only choice of living in a socialist country is socialized medicine. That's not true. There will always be private providers for those that can afford to pay. But I mean, I look at the receipts, I look at the invoices every time I go to the doctor, take my kids to the doctor. The money. I mean, here's the thing, right? I went for a COVID test because I thought I had some symptoms. If you go for a COVID test here in the States in a clinic and you say you have some symptoms, they are then able to send the doctor in to check you out. So the COVID test that I went for was charged at like $180. Not charged to me, charged to the healthcare company. But wait for this, Carla. Because I said I had some symptoms, I was negative, by the way, and the doctor came in and said, okay, what are your symptoms? And I said, and he goes, okay, well, do this. Maybe you should isolate. Okay, yeah, I was like, yeah, fine. And he left. He was in there for three or 4 minutes. When I saw the receipt that came through, they charged an extra $400 for the doctor to come into the room to give me that little lecture that I already knew. $400. That's how American healthcare is profiting off of a pandemic. They've worked out the loopholes that enable them to profit. And if you look at the biggest healthcare provider in the US, I think it's called something like US National Healthcare. I don't know. There's one of the companies. Their profits have tripled during the pandemic. They're the biggest provider of private insurance. I think they have like a third of the market. Their profits have tripled during the pandemic. They have made something like $25 billion more than they normally make. Yeah, I think, and also the other thing about the UK system is they don't have the kind of representatives. You know, I had a relative who was working as a medical rep, and she sold medical equipment, you know, for spine surgery and stuff. And she was very attractive, and she used to have to go flirt with the male doctors in order to make a sale, and it was the doctors themselves that agreed to buy the product for their surgeries, which to me is so underhand and weird that would even happen. The money was so huge, she made a fortune out of this. And then she had to go into the operating theatre during the surgery in scrubs to show the doctor how to use it. Now, in England, we have laws against all of this. Medical reps are not allowed to meet with doctors directly. They have to meet with the primary care trust or whoever the kind of buyer is, the intermediary. And they're not allowed to like lobby as they used to do all that stuff, but they stopped all that. And to have a medical rep in a theater, like an operating theater, doing a surgery, like assisting a surgery, it's just beggars belief to me that would happen. And the company she worked for made millions of dollars in profit selling little titanium screws for spinal surgery. She used to keep them in the trunk of her car. I remember she opened the car once and they'd all like fallen out of their containers. I was like, I hope you're going to get those cleaned. I hope they're going to get sterilized before they go into a human, kicking around in the back of the car. It's just another world. And even nurses, in England, nurses are paid very, very little. The starting salary for a nurse is around £14,000, which is like $18,000. And with that, they used to get kind of nurse accommodation, but that's happening less and less now. And then the average salary for a nurse is between £21,000 and £27,000. And yet the average salary for a nurse here in the United States is over $60,000 or $70,000. So, people, the economies are just different. But in England, people really do work for slave wages, and they're just used to it. But a starting salary for a nurse is so little. It's so little. That's right. At least in England, there is a few days off, You get a few weeks off. Not in America. We'll pay you well, but you got to work. It's fascinating, isn't it? The difference. It's just fascinating to me. Okay, let's go back to the newspaper. I think we're kind of done there on the front of the San Diego Union Tribune. Let's go to... there is a story that I missed on there that I think you wanted me to do. Here we go. It's the study of fewer people moving to California, more leaving. This is very interesting, actually. We talked a little bit about this the other day, and I think some of it was connected to being like Republicans who just wanted to get away from a Republican state. The number of people moving to California from other states has dropped significantly since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. Unless, of course, they want an abortion. That might be the only reason people move to California. It's just so tragic. It's so tragic. According to a new study released on Wednesday, the two trends signal that population loss due to domestic migration out of the Golden State has more than doubled since the beginning of the pandemic. The pattern has rippled across California. New entrants to the state have dropped in every county since the end of March 2020. When Californians do move, researchers said they are slightly more likely to leave the state than they were before the start of the pandemic. Entrances to California from other states have dropped 38% since March of last year, while the number of residents leaving the other states has increased 12%, the report from the nonpartisan California Policy Lab said. They're focusing on a thing called Cal Exodus. It's a phenomenon, but in reality, the dramatic drop in Cal entrances since the pandemic began has been a bigger driver of recent population changes. The study found no evidence of a pronounced exodus from the state, but showed that net entrances from other states have dropped significantly since the start of the pandemic. On net today, California loses more than twice as many people to domestic migration as it did before the pandemic. I mean, is that because California has quite a strict mask mandate? Is it because, what is the reason for that? Because, I actually thought California was one of the easiest places to survive the pandemic. There was no strict rules. I mean, for a while they closed some of the beaches, but you could always find like a little secret beach to go to. But the main public beaches, the big, Venice Beach and that lot, they closed those. But in the main, you could go for a hike, you could go for a walk, you could be outside, you could eat outside because of the climate. The climate enables you to have a very nice existence here. And I had friends and family living in Europe, and their lockdown was so extreme they weren't even allowed to meet with their own family, who lived in a different household. And yet I'm enjoying having barbecue parties. I was thinking I don't actually know anybody in California who really got coronavirus. Isn't that weird? My sister got it in London, but I don't actually know anybody in California that got coronavirus. My sister, who just arrived yesterday, she's tested negative last night, but she got a text from a friend that she was sharing drinks with 2 days earlier who got COVID. Unbelievable. So, okay, that's the front of the San Diego Union Tribune. Let's see what's next on the list. I do believe we have the Herald and Review. Where's this from? The Herald and Review. Oh, it's Illinois. It went over the page. There you go. Illinois. They lead with a photograph of tornado relief. It says volunteer Charles Woodrum and organizer Devin White collect items on Wednesday for Kentucky tornado relief. The collection will also take place on Thursday. And they talked about the need for batteries and items for Christmas. Kentucky tornado relief sign is shown on the side of a truck trailer as a volunteer Chloe Butler collects items to load. I mean, this is what everyone's doing. Everyone's chipping in, doing their best. This is interesting. This is a suggestion that Governor Pritzker, J.B. Pritzker, is currently seeking re-election to another 4-year stay in the Illinois governor's mansion. They're not even embarrassed to say the word mansion. In England, we would never say the word mansion. It's like it's embarrassing to say mansion. But there's just different places. Here, it's like you'd be proud of your mansion. It said, could the first-term governor be eyeing a bigger prize, possibly the White House, in 2024? That's the question some Illinois political observers and pundits have been asking since Pritzker's name appeared in a New York Times article this past Sunday that explores which Democrats could be Plan B if President Joe Biden decides not to seek a second term. Pritzker was one of 9 candidates identified in the piece, which also included more obvious choices like Vice President Kamala Harris, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. It says, to be clear, Biden has said he does intend to seek a second term, but his sagging approval ratings and age, he'll be 82 on Inauguration Day, have some Democrats playing a favorite Beltway parlor game. Something's repeating on me. Who's running for president next? Well, there's a couple of things here that are wrong about this article. His poll ratings are improving. They're actually on the way up. I think he scored 49 yesterday. And, Trump never got 49. And being 82 on Inauguration Day means that right now he's in his 70s. And to be in your 70s these days is not old. It just isn't. I mean, Nancy Pelosi's 119. There's a lot of people a lot older than Joe Biden, and he's slim. And I do think that being slim and old is very good because you're not carrying. Actually, Pritzker is a big fat thing. He's a big man. He looks like the Godfather. And I don't mean the Godfather, I mean Marlon Brando, like 3 weeks before he died. He's gigantic. They'll never vote for a man that fat. All presidents have been slim. Abraham Lincoln was like a spindly thing. There's never been a fat president. Think about it. Nixon was a big guy, but he wasn't overweight. Considering America has an obesity crisis, not in the White House. I mean, if you truly want to be a man of the people, you need to eat a few more cheeseburgers, Mr. Biden. Oh, actually, what about Donald Trump? I forgot about him. President Taft apparently was a big guy. Yeah. Oh wow. He was in office in 1913. So Trump. I mean, do you remember what happened with Trump when he went for his physical? And because he's chief medical man in the White House was a friend of his, he got him to say that he wasn't in the obese category when he clearly was. So he basically lied about his weight. Lied that he wasn't in the obese category. Because, to be in the obese category, you just need to be 200 pounds. That's the line. 200 pounds. Apparently, President Taft was so fat, he got stuck in the White House bathtub and had to ask for a bigger one to be installed. Well, maybe that bigger one is still there, and then President Pritzker can use it. You know, when he goes for a soak. It's very interesting, this. Anyway, I actually think that Biden will seek a second term, and I think he will likely win a second term. Because, you know, I was getting frustrated a few weeks ago about Biden and like taking so long to get everything done. But if you think about it, the infrastructure bill is done. The social care and climate bill is close to being done. Behind the scenes, apparently there's talk of changing the rules of the filibuster for the Voting Rights Act, which, interestingly, every single solitary Republican congressman and senator is against. Every single one. There's not even a solitary defector for the Voting Rights Act. I mean, I guess maybe Liz Cheney might, you know. But not a solitary defector. None of the Republican lawmakers want to pass a Voting Rights Act. What does that say? I mean, you might think maybe half of them would want to. It's very interesting to me, isn't it? Very interesting. Stacey says £200 is nothing. You should be in the £400 mark. That's where you are in the obesity category. No, that's not true. It's all based on your height. So if you look at the scale, if you are 5'9" and above, and you're over 200 pounds, I think that puts you into the obese category. Overweight, average weight, underweight. And then if you're over like 5'9", 5'10", and you're over 200 pounds, you're in the obese category. 400 pounds, that is clinically obese. That's a completely different category. That is like where you need to be lifted out of bed with machinery. Which was a bit like me getting out of bed this morning and putting my back out. That's basically what happened. But 400 pounds, that's like a whole different category. But obesity is the 200 pound limit. It's too much weight to carry around. Because it makes you ill in other ways. It's bad on your knees, so you ending up having to have knee surgery. It's bad on your back, so you end up having to have back surgery. It's bad on your hips, you know. And this is the thing: if you're overweight, then the addition, and that's the other thing, isn't it? Because of course, in a country that doesn't have free healthcare, being overweight means that you're more likely to get sick, which means you're more likely to have to pay to get better. So you'll be broke, and then you'll be on, you know, in what do they call it? Incapacity? They have a name for it here. Do they say invalid? They have terrible words. They still say handicapped in America. They think that's normal. Yeah. Don't park in the handicap space, they say. I'm like, it's not 1982. In England, the word handicapped hasn't been used for over 30 years. And you don't even say disabled anymore in England. You say people with disabilities. Or you say, people with disabilities. You refer to in fact, you actually identify their disability. You know? You need to see it. Handicapped. So, such an offensive word. So going back to Pritzker, it says Pritzker sought to tamp down speculation when he asked reporters in Chicago this week, saying he has no intention of running for anything except re-election as governor. He says, I want to be governor of Illinois. I want to continue to be governor of Illinois. I'm doing the job that I love. He acknowledged that some have mentioned the possibility of him running for president. He said he's never had a conversation with anybody about it. Reaction among Illinois Democratic political consultants and experts on presidential politics were mixed in their assessment of a Pritzker presidential bid, noting that it was plausible but nevertheless improbable. I mean, the thing is, saying that, Trump had no political experience before, and if he's a one-term governor, then I wonder what he did before. What was his job before he was governor? Was he a union boss? Another long-time Democratic political consultant who spoke on the condition their name not be used agreed that governing Illinois qualifies most folks to do a pretty big things. Illinois is a state that is most similar to the nation as a whole when you take into account things like race, education, diversity of the economy, diversity of the landscape. We have rural areas, we have cities and suburbs. So being the governor of the state definitely qualifies you. There it is. Incapacitated, yeah. Yeah, if you're an incapacity benefit. Thank you, Stacey. Appreciate that. It's interesting, isn't it, how language, some words are considered inappropriate or offensive. It's a bit like swear words. I try and explain this to my kids, why. And the simple attitude is, why are some words bad and other words okay? What is it about language and something as simple as a word? How can it have a negative connotation, especially if it's said in an angry, malicious way? Monica, good morning. Thank you for joining us here on Backchannel. It's 9:52 Pacific, 11:52 Eastern. No. 1:52 Eastern. No. 12:52 Eastern. I really don't know. Monica, please accept my apologies. I need a second clock, really. I need a second clock. That's what I need. Because I can't add 3. I just can't add 3. If you want to get in touch, Monica, you can go to your browser, type in backchannel.tv. No need to register. You can just message me there. Easy. We're also joined by Danar and Judy and Eva and Lee and Dennis and Stacy this morning here on Backchannel, surfing the newspapers together. So that's the Herald and Review for Illinois this morning. There's a story here about discipline in schools. It says public schools will have a student discipline reset beginning after the winter break. It says during a presentation by Student Services at the Tuesday school board meeting, the assistant superintendent discussed the uptick in student behavior issues since in-person classes resumed in August. We do want to address the impact COVID has had on us returning to school. We do know that morale and also the necessity of a reset has been based off coming back from the pandemic. We've been seeing behavior indicative of a necessity to reset on the student level. Interesting. Jeff, good morning. Thank you for joining Backchannel. I'm Anthony. This is... I'd love to know what really goes on in schools. I do get the feeling that especially as a parent, that it's like a bit of a... It's a bit like kind of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. You drop your kid off at school, they go through the magic wardrobe, and you just have no idea what world they're entering. It's like a C.S. Lewis day out. I don't know what they're encountering, really. I mean, I know my daughter got involved in an altercation recently that required, some... And she's only 6, but apparently she got involved in an altercation with a boy. She's got some, she's definitely got some gumption. My daughter, she's got gumption. Cahoonies, yeah. Austin American Statesman now is the next newspaper on the on our paper review list. It says, live PD struggle revealed almost from the start. A lead detective in the Javier Ambler The second in-custody death investigation said she felt Williamson County Sheriff's officials and producers for a popular reality TV show were stonewalling her. Oh, that sounds like a terrible story. Books squabble delays millions. This is more like it. It says the Round Rock and Leander school districts might not receive $8.7 million in federal CARES Act money from Williamson County because some commissioners said they are concerned about graphic books and the teaching of critical race theory in the districts. The Commissioners' Court on Tuesday voted 4-1 to delay allocating any CARES Act money to the districts until commissioners discuss their concerns with school superintendents. The money would help pay for coronavirus-related expenses that schools have incurred, including remote learning costs and personal protective equipment. It must be allocated by December 31st, or the county will have to send it back to the federal government. Interesting. I mean, the fact that they have a commissioner's court that is voting, to delay allocating CARES Act money to the districts. I mean, this all goes back to this, critical race theory and all of these, concerns that parents are now having that are based on very little other than just, right-wing extremist misinformation. I'm not okay with giving money to school districts that teach critical race theory or allow books in libraries, especially classroom libraries, where there's no supervision, said Commissioner Valerie Covey. Books we would consider X-rated. Do me a favor, Valerie. Come on, Valerie. Get with the real world. Are you aware that what you're saying is not actually true? It's just not true. You're just scared. People have scared you. Commissioner Cynthia Long said she agreed. I checked and some of those books you talked about are still in classrooms. She said voters turned down bonds for new Leander schools in the November election because it was their only way to tell the school district, we don't agree with what you're doing. The Round Rock School District was disappointed the commissioners did not approve the CARES Act money for the district, according to the spokeswoman. Wow. I mean, what world are we living in now where books are being held to ransom by school commissioners because they don't like the content? There's a story here about a new road in Illinois. It's the Texas 130 in southwestern Travis County. It directs drivers to exit onto Tesla Road. But at the moment, there is no Tesla Road. It says if you happen to be driving along the road in southwestern Travis County, you'll notice a new sign that tells you exit 446 now takes you onto Tesla Road. That might not seem surprising, as the $1.1 billion manufacturing facility that automaker Tesla is building is clearly visible just off the toll road. But there is a sticking point. At the moment, there is technically no Tesla Road in Travis County. The Travis County Commissioner's Court is considering a request from Tesla to change the name of Harold Green Road, the road that runs in front of Tesla's property, but the county has not yet formally made the change. I mean, it's kind of jokes, isn't it? This is the power of Tesla. This is the power of Tesla, The Commissioner's Court voted this week to hold a December 21st public hearing on potentially changing the road's name and to negotiate with Tesla about additional work on another nearby road. Despite that, the Texas Department for Transportation has erected a sign proclaiming that the road is now Tesla Road. Google Maps has already updated searches for Harold Green Road to instead show Tesla Road. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. You know, Tesla brings a lot of money into that town. It's a bit like Apple, you know, being in Cupertino and renaming roads there. It's a little bit like IKEA here in Burbank, California. They renamed the street IKEA Way. And it's the largest IKEA in the Western world. It is gigantic. More meatballs than you can possibly imagine. Apparently, IKEA is one of the world's largest charities. They've somehow managed to get charitable status, despite the fact they sell laminate furniture and pass it off as solid wood. It's very interesting to me. I really feel like this is like corporate America or corporate Sweden in action, isn't it? You know, this is where the power of the dollar, the power of the Tesla, Sweden is a very interesting country. I've been to Stockholm a couple of times. I think they have the highest rate of student suicide in Sweden than anywhere else because education is so difficult there, like further education, like they're really strict. And it's wonderful. I mean, they're all multilingual, all the kids in Sweden. Whereas here, you know, we can barely master one language, and yet in Sweden they're speaking three. But if you look up like student suicide, teenage suicide, Sweden has the highest rate because of the pressure. Teenage suicide, I'm being very specific here. It's not a suicide competition. Josiah joined the stream. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. Monica, Jeff, Stacy, welcome to Backchannel. So yeah, it's interesting that this street is renamed Tesla. And you know, I often say this about big, you know, corporate interests, is that they're very attractive to places. You know, when Steve Jobs went and made his case to the Cupertino council, you know, the city. It's actually on YouTube if you want to watch it. He made his case for building this new, they call it, you know, the Apple headquarters, the new Apple headquarters. And it's not far from the original Apple headquarters, which was at an address, I think it was number 1 Infinite Loop was the name of the address of their headquarters. But they outgrew it. Their new headquarters is gigantic. It's gigantic. It's something like 4,000 acres. And it's called Apple Park. And there is a park in the middle of the loop. It's just a huge loop. Huge circle. Apple Circle, I think they call it. And it's beautiful. Steve Jobs designed it himself. And then he died, and he never got to go there. Wow. Sweden has 1 billionaire for every 250,000 people. It's very expensive to live in Sweden, but, you know, the taxation is very high there. It's the same with a lot of Scandinavian countries. You know, the taxation is quite high, but services are excellent, like really good. And that's the difference. So what do you want to do? Pay a little more tax and live in a really very well-run city? And that's kind of something I've enjoyed about Norway. I've been to all of these places. I worked in Norway for a while. Stockholm. Oslo's an amazing city. I do feel like... What else is considered Scandinavia? Oh, Finland. I've been to Finland. I've been to... what's the town in Finland called? The port town. It's called... Helsinki? No. No. Yeah, the main one. Oslo's in Norway. Where's Helsinki? Is that Finland? Might be. I mean, this has become like a quiz. Yeah, Helsinki's Finland. So I've been to Helsinki and Oslo in Norway a couple of times. I've been a few places in Norway. I've been to northern Norway, to the Arctic Circle, to Tromsø, which is one of the furthest places you can go north to see the northern lights. And I sledded with huskies and it was amazing. I didn't see the northern lights. I was eating steak at the time in a restaurant during the hour of the Solus Maximus. What a mistake that was. 6 minutes after 10, this is Backchannel. I'm Anthony Davis. Thank you for joining us. If you want to get in touch, you can, of course, message via backchannel.tv. And you can also just talk to your Echo Show. If you've got one, you just wake it up, then say, and then you message. It comes straight through. Easy. Anything else on the front of the Austin American Statesman here? No, that's about it. Unless, of course, you want to hear an advert for a law firm. I'm good. San Antonio Express News. Stacey, you are up next. Here it is. I love the fact that they publish the weather on the front of the San Antonio Express News. I've never seen that before. Warm, humid, highs of 81, lows of 68. But Texas is pretty warm, right? It's pretty warm. It's a desert. It's pretty warm. Sea change in military justice on the front of the San Antonio Express News. Historic reforms to how the military handles reports of crimes, including sexual assault and murder, are headed to President Joe Biden's desk to be assigned into law, spurred by mistakes at Fort Hood, where Army Sergeant Vanessa Guillen was killed last year by a fellow soldier. The Houston native, whose reports of sexual harassment by a superior officer were ignored by her chain of command, went missing from the base for 2 months before her body was found last summer. An outside investigation later found a deficient climate at the post and concluded that Fort Hood leadership knew or should have known of the high risk of harm to female soldiers. How is that even happening in this day and age? You know, when we know so much about, hierarchy and abuse in institutions, how is that even happening now? It says the reforms, at least a decade in the making, and the most significant changes ever made to the military justice system. They mark a major victory for the Guillen family, which has spent more than a year calling for changes to address sexual assault in the military. 20,000 assaults happen every year. Beggars belief, isn't it? A photograph of Joe Biden wearing his cap. Recover and rebuild. Biden vows help for tornado victims is the headline. It says President Joe Biden on Wednesday night. Yes, Carla? Well, yeah, this picture is very cute because this girl, her name is Rayleigh Hall, and he's surveying storm damage from the tornadoes, and she's kind of wrapped in an American flag. She's holding an American flag, and it's a lovely photo. He's kind of grinning, and he's got one hand on her shoulder, and she's staring up at his face and looking really very proud to meet the president. Recover and rebuild. Biden vows help for tornado victims. He said he pledges to do whatever it takes, as long as it takes, to help Kentucky and other states after a series of deadly tornadoes that he said left a trail of unimaginable devastation. You will recover and rebuild, he said. Now, here's an interesting throwback to Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan has voted against aid for multiple counties, multiple states when they've needed it, foreign aid as well. The guy does not believe in it. And here, of course, he begged Joe Biden to provide aid for his people. There's a huge contradiction of need What is the mindset of lawmakers who vote against aid for others in need? Where does that come from? Can they not kind of think about the fact that one day maybe they will need aid? Their states will need aid. They will need help. That people are fallible. Do we never think about others at all? Stacey has to go, but Ellis has joined us. Ellis, hello. Thank you for joining Backchannel. It's 11 after 10 on this Thursday morning. Maybe this is the issue. Maybe because Jim Jordan is so wealthy, and I would love to know how he made his money, because he was working as a gym instructor, so that it just doesn't make sense to me. But anyway, maybe it's because the wealthy have the least empathy, and the poor have the most empathy. I mean, interestingly, Joe Biden's never made very much money. I mean, that's the other interesting thing about Biden, in the big scheme of things. He was a public defender. He was on a city salary, state salary. And then, of course, he got a senator's salary. And they do pay lawmakers quite well in America, whereas in England they pay lawmakers very, very badly. And I always I used to go on the TV news and advocate for lawmakers to be paid more in England. I used to say that it should be a flat fee. Because the thing is, lawmakers are paid about £60,000 a year. But on top of that, they're given like an expense account. And so they expense so many things. So they effectively, are earning more in a roundabout kind of way, including meals. And I've never understood that, because everybody needs to eat a meal, whether you're working in Parliament or outside of it. You still got to pay for your food, right? But it just occurred to me that you'd be better off with lawmakers in the UK paying them £100,000 a year and not giving them an expense account. Do you see what I mean? So everybody gets paid the same. And then out of that, they can work out how to make that work for themselves. But the problem is, and I suppose it's the same here in the US, everybody needs a home near the Parliament building, which in England is in London. But they also have to have a constituency home as well. In America, it would probably be called a mansion. Also on the front of the San Antonio Express News this morning, far too little vote frauds to tip results. It says, I think I mentioned this yesterday, the Associated Press review of every potential case of voter fraud in the 6 battleground states disputed by the former president Donald Trump has found fewer than 475. Was that the number I said yesterday? I think it was. 475. A number that would have made no difference in the presidential election. Joe Biden won Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, and 79 electoral college votes by a combined 311,257 votes out of 22.5 million. Ballots cast for president. The disputed ballots represent just 0.15% of his victory margin in those states. The cases could not throw the outcome into question, even if all those votes were for Biden, which they were not. And even if those ballots were actually counted, in which most cases they were not. Which just is another way of saying that Donald Trump's fraud argument is false, it's fake, it's designed only to overturn an American election, which is an act of treason. That's all it is. It's just an act of treason. Okay, that's the San Antonio Express News. I think we've got one more. Let's have a look. We've actually got 3 more. Okay, let's hear the news update. This is the US News Update. It's a daily podcast that I do daily, and you can download it daily wherever you get your podcasts. And then we'll come back and we'll take a look at the Bradenton Herald, as well as the Tampa Bay Times and the Tribune Review, and keep an eye on Ron DeSantis and see what that guy's up to in just a second. It's Thursday, December 16. From the Volley Network, this is your daily US news update. I'm Anthony Davis. US Senate Democrats were struggling on Wednesday to find a path forward on President Joe Biden's $1.75 trillion domestic investment bill, with moderate Joe Manchin objecting to parts of the program. Having averted a government shutdown potential default this month, Senate Democrats hope to pass the sweeping Build Back Better bill before Christmas. But the source said Biden and Manchin remain far apart, with Manchin objecting to an expanded child tax credit that other Democrats want in the program. Manchin angrily denied that he was opposed to the tax child credit. "I've always been for tax child credits. We voted for it many times," he told reporters in the Capitol. With no votes to spare in passing the Build Back Better initiative, amid solid Republican opposition, Senate Democrat Chuck Schumer faces his biggest challenge since becoming majority leader in January. He's feeling the heat from all sides. Meanwhile, universities cancelled events. The National Football League reported a record number of cases, and long lines formed at New York City testing clinics as a sharp rise in COVID-19 cases and concern over the Omicron variant disrupted American life anew. The NFL and two other major North American sports leagues scrambled to control outbreaks as the threat of widespread schedule disruptions loomed larger. Over the past month, new cases have risen nearly 50% to a 7-day average of 122,000 new infections per day. Across the country, COVID hospitalizations have risen 50% in the last month. Your daily US news update is part of the Volley Network. To hear my live daily morning show, ask your Amazon Echo Show device to open Backchannel. There it is, the US News Update. It's a daily podcast that you can download wherever you get your podcasts and get a kind of sense of, what's happening around the US. That's kind of how we do it. Okay, let's jump back into those newspapers. I mentioned we had a few more to look at, and the Bradenton Herald is where we're going to go first. So let's just leap into that one. They lead with DeSantis amps up fight against critical race theory in schools. It says Governor Ron DeSantis on Wednesday held a rowdy event billed as a press conference to ramp up the volume on his fight against the influence of critical race theory in schools and businesses across Florida. At Electon donning a Stop Woke Act sign. So offensive. The Republican governor seeking re-election in 2022 told the heavily Republican Sumter County crowd that he will push legislation next year that will protect kids and workers against very pernicious ideologies, and enlisted Christopher Rufo, who spurred the national conservative movement against the theory, to fire up the crowd. He said, "In Florida, we are taking a stand against the state-sanctioned racism that is critical race theory," DeSantis told attendees, who cheered and waved signs with the word CRT crossed out. "We won't allow Florida tax dollars to be spent teaching kids to hate our country or to hate each other." No, that's right. They just want to teach them that white is best. White is best. And if he refers to it against a very pernicious ideology, what he's actually suggesting is that to grow up as a white supremacist is not in itself a very pernicious ideology. And I would suggest that white supremacy is. The other thing is that there is no critical race theory in the curriculum. Critical race theory, for people who have not read about it, is something that is only analyzed at university level. It's done by people who are in their early 20s. It's not done by children at elementary or in high school. They just don't. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. So what they're referring to is CRT is a module that could be discussed in some universities as a module. It's a theory, like relativity or gravity. It's a theory, and it's something that sparks debate. It's analytical. It's theological. It's essential. for people doing that module. Critical race theory does not exist in high school. What they are trying to do is take out anything that is promoting black culture, anything that is questioning white culture. So anything that might reference slavery, abolitionists, something that might make the white man look less than favorable is the stuff that they are seeking to remove, which in itself is not, it is in itself a very pernicious ideology. Because Ron DeSantis is a white supremacist, and so are all of these people that are associated with him. Christopher Rufo, who spurred the national conservative movement against critical race theory, is a white supremacist. Because if you don't understand how essential it is to integrate ethnic minority groups, African Americans and Latinos and everybody in between, to integrate them into society in an equal way, and why it's important to do that, then you're a white supremacist. If you cannot take into account the persecution of black Americans, you are a white supremacist. If you cannot have empathy for the fact that life for black Americans is harder than for white Americans, then you're a white supremacist. You know, white supremacy is not just being a member of the Ku Klux Klan. You know, it goes much further than that now. It needs to permeate into all of society, because to be woke, and I don't like the phrase woke either because it's been hijacked, but to be woke is just to be thoughtful. That's all. That's really what it means, isn't it? To have woken up to the fact that we've been doing it wrong for a long time. And the other thing is, with all of these white supremacists like Ron DeSantis and Christopher Rufo and the people, that are in the know here, who are trying to make these changes, is that they are the deniers, a bit like climate change deniers. They're deniers of history. They want to rewrite history because they're embarrassed. Now, I'm not saying that they're racist. I'm saying they're white supremacist. It's not racist. It's different. They believe that the white race is the predominant American race. They believe that, to teach about other races and other creeds and other colors, they hate being called racist. So they therefore are saying, well, if you abolish critical race theory, then we're not racist because we're not, singling it out. But they've missed the point of the argument. They've missed the whole point of the discussion. And really, a lot of this boils down to intellect, just having enough intellect to be able to feel what it's... And also wealth, as we were discussing earlier. Ron DeSantis is wealthy. A lot of these people have money. And therefore, by the nature of having money, they have less empathy. And they don't want to mix with the poor. And the poor, invariably, in America, statistically, tend to be black Americans. Also a huge number of white Americans that also tend to vote for people like Ron DeSantis, which makes no sense because he won't ever do anything for the poor. He doesn't care for the poor. For him, it's all about the middle class and up. That's what Donald Trump said. It's all about the middle class and up. No mention of the poor. Maybe people in America don't want to admit to being poor. Is that a big part of this? Like, to admit to being poor is some way contradicts the American dream. Because in England, we refer to relative poverty. That's really the language that we use, relative poverty. And to be relatively poor means that you can still work, you still have a job, you still have a home, you still have a car and a cell phone. But you're still poor because you have no disposable income. Every penny you earn is spent. And I would say that, arguably 75% of the UK live in relative poverty. People don't even realize they're poor in England because that's just how they live. Because we live in a country that was bombed to smithereens in the 1940s. And it's never really recovered. Still living in that kind of historical place. Anyway, let's consider the fact that this, Florida itself is an increasingly wealthy place and eventually will become a kind of white supremacist haven. No, but I'm saying that the thing is, there are very poor parts of Florida. Miami has very poor parts. I've been around parts of Miami, and it's really a mess. And there's a lot of African Americans living there. In ghettos, in shanty towns. And a lot of these people are migrants from the Bahamas, which is just, like 50 miles out at sea. So Ron DeSantis, amping up fight against critical race theory in schools. Wonderful. Manatee to get new animal shelter thanks to Bishop donation. That's nice. And Florida may extend hours of alligator hunt. What? I mean, it's almost like Florida is like a joke place, isn't it? It's like the local newspaper for Disneyland. Into hunting alligators in Florida? You may soon be able to engage in this activity at all hours of the day. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission is floating a proposal. This is not even a joke. To amend the rules of the state's alligator harvest program. That means trappers won't be limited to a nighttime harvesting schedule. If approved, times will be increased from 17 to 24 hours and go into effect for 2022. Although night hunts can be thrilling, this is nothing to do with conservation. This is a sport. It's a sport. It says, even though night hunts can be thrilling, and the time when gators are most active, 7 more hours of seeing clearly can be beneficial. It's easier to navigate a boat and work with hunting equipment during the day, the website says. Daylight is helpful when supervising youth in a boat or introducing new participants to alligator hunting. It also eliminates any concerns about hooking an alligator shortly before 10 a.m. Oh my goodness. Not a word about conservation. This is a sport. It's a sport. They love it. It's Florida. Florida is just its own weird place. It just is. And they probably feel the same about California. They just think we're crazy over here. All these places. Okay, let's go. We'll stay in Florida. Go to the Tampa Bay Times. They lead with January 6th aftermath, attacks on the truth. It says there is zero evidence to say the Capitol assault was an Antifa operation, a tourist visit, or a false flag, or uneventful day to forget. Well, this is good. So shortly after 2 p.m. on the 6th of January, supporters of President Donald J. Trump breached the U.S. Capitol, turning the seat of American democracy into a scene of unforgettable crime. Inside, lawmakers have been preparing to count the Electoral College votes that would bring Trump's presidency to a close. Outside, the rioters erected a gallows. They waved Trump 2020, Blue Lives Matter, and Confederate flags. Some were armed. Network and cable TV plus internet sites broadcast it all live for hours. The rioters forced their way into House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office. They entered the Senate chamber. They reached the dais where Vice President Mike Pence had sat moments earlier. Around the nation, people called friends and family as the attack unfolded, right before their eyes, expressing a mix of disbelief, horror, and fascination. "Can you believe this?" they said. Members of Congress, evacuated from their chambers with gas masks in tow, could hardly believe it themselves. Yeah, I mean, all the evidence now suggests that this was exactly what it was. It was an insurrection born of a coup. The coup was planned. It was printed on a PowerPoint presentation. They knew exactly what they were going to do. And Jim Jordan, it's been suggested today, sent a text, been confirmed by his office, telling Mark Meadows, the chief of staff, how to subvert the election and to only count the paper ballots and to bring in the military and to turn it into a police state whilst this election is recounted in Trump's favor. Also on the front of the Tampa Bay Times this morning, DeSantis rails about racism teaching. Governor Ron DeSantis held a rowdy event billed as a news conference to ramp up the volume on his fight against the influence of critical race theory in schools and businesses across Florida. You know what's very clever about this is systemic racism. It's stealth racism. He's being racist, but claiming that he's doing it because he's not racist. And he's doing it in the name of equality, right? But because he doesn't have an intellect, he doesn't realize that actually to any person of color or anybody who takes an interest in this subject, that his behavior is racist. It says, while the governor's proposals drew praise in the room, critics who were watching the event unfold called the proposal a politically motivated effort that aims to whitewash history and avoid uncomfortable subjects about race. It was not all peaches and cream, said Senate Education Vice Chair Chevron Jones. Republicans know we are stepping into very dangerous territory when you start messing with black history and literally moving goalposts when it comes to what actually happened. Insane. Okay, that's the Tampa Bay Times. And then our final newspaper is the Tribune Review from Greensburg, Philadelphia. And they lead this morning with lights, camera, history. An area provides props as film crew sets up Compass Inn at Laughlinton. They're obviously filming something there. Lawmaker offers hand in avoiding COVID shots. This is interesting. This is a state lawmaker offering vaccination exemption assistance while local health officials plead with residents to mask up and get vaccinated. And Excella Health struggles to deal with COVID-19 infections that have pushed its 3 Westmoreland County hospitals beyond capacity. Yet Republican State Representative Leslie Rossi said she offered help to those seeking vaccination exemptions in response to growing inquiries from fearful constituents in her district, which includes portions of eastern Westmoreland and western Somerset counties. Her newsletter landed in local mailboxes. Officials warned of a desperate situation in local hospitals where COVID-19 infections have surged among unvaccinated residents, sparking overcrowding in emergency rooms and scarcity of beds in inpatient and intensive care units. Meanwhile, how is she assisting? She says no one has any right to try and force any individual to get vaccinated, and yet that's what we're seeing happen. She just doesn't get it. She's killing people. But because this is this US obsession with freedom, it's not supposed to go before mortality. Mortality goes first, then freedom and liberty come second. You can't celebrate your rights to free speech and freedom if you're dead. You have to be vaccinated. That's not the issue of freedom. Vaccination has nothing to do with freedom. We've been mandating vaccines since time began. And yet, for some reason, Republicans have got it into their heads that this COVID vaccine is different to mumps, measles, rubella, polio, tetanus, and hepatitis. They've just got it into their heads that this vaccine is different. They've now vaccinated 99% of the US military, right? Only 1% are unvaccinated. And they reckon that that's something like 3,700 servicemen and women. And they are threatening to court-martial them, to fire them from active military service in January. So they're being given a last chance to consider vaccination. What is wrong with it? It's only a vaccine. I wouldn't mind, but if they were mandating that everybody had to eat, sheep's brains or lamb kidney, then that's different. But they're not. It's a vaccine. It wears off. Idiots. Just wears off. So let's talk about David Frum, who is he's a writer. He doesn't actually work for CNN. He's a contributor to CNN. He's actually a staff writer at The Atlantic. And it says he's causing controversy, suggesting the unvaccinated should be treated last in hospital. But we're asking, does he have a point? Does he have a point? He wrote an article saying, Ed Yong wrote an article in The Atlantic saying America is not ready for Omicron. The new variant poses a far graver threat at the collective level than the individual one, the kind of test that the US has repeatedly failed. Said America was not prepared for COVID-19 when it arrived. It was not prepared for last winter's surge. It was not prepared for Delta's arrival in the summer. More than 1,000 Americans are still dying from COVID every day, and more have died this year than last. Hospitalizations are rising in 42 states. And yet, still, with a new variant on the horizon, and countries like the UK locking down and boosting everybody. And when the UK is boosting everybody, they're boosting people that have already had 2 vaccinations. Because most people in the UK have now been vaccinated. It's over 90%. The real unknown is what an Omicron cross will do when it follows a Delta hook. Given what scientists have learned in the last 3 weeks since Omicron's discovery, some of the absolute worst-case scenarios that were possible when we saw its genome are off the table, but so are some of the most hopeful scenarios, said Dylan Morris, an evolutionary biologist at UCLA. In any case, America is not prepared for Omicron. The variant's threat is far greater at the societal level than at the personal one. The policymakers have already cut themselves off from the tools needed to protect the populations they serve. Like the variants that preceded it, Omicron requires individuals to think and act for the collective good, which is to say it poses a heightened version of the same challenge the US has failed for 2 straight years in bipartisan fashion. Look, if you're a Democrat, you're probably thinking, well, the Republicans deserve what they get. If they don't want to get vaccinated, then they're just going to get sick, and many of them will pass away. And yet Republicans think that they're winning because, we're not getting vaccinated. They're using this thing called natural immunity, which doesn't exist. This is their excuse. They're calling it natural immunity. I actually heard a conservative politician in the Houses of Parliament in the UK stand up and make a speech, lied about vaccination, and claim that natural immunity, if you've had COVID before, is better protection than being vaccinated. And that's a lie. And he stood up and said it. Because the thing is, if you've had COVID before, you don't know what strain you had. You don't know if you had Alpha or Delta or something else. So you don't know what antibodies your body has made. Whereas if you have an mRNA vaccine, which will protect you from Delta and Alpha, and in 3 doses, Omicron. Because it's an intelligent vaccine. It prevents these mutations. It stops the spike protein from adhering to your immune system. And so the British lawmaker was just lying. But he's a famous liar, this guy. He really is not a good person. Famous liar. Fox News have presented this story in a very interesting way. They say, The Atlantic's David Frum continued to push for hospitals and doctors to treat unvaccinated patients during his appearance on CNN on Wednesday. The Atlantic staff writer was featured on CNN's New Day, where co-host Brianna Keilar or Kayla, invited Frum to argue for his provocative suggestion that she's sure a lot of people agree with. Frum began by blaming politicians and personalities who apparently want to hurt President Biden and the Democratic Party. Lexus, hello, thank you for joining us. You're with Ellis and Josiah and Monica and Jeff, Judy, Danar and Eva. Thank you. This is Backchannel. So we have this terrible problem, and it's being incited and preserved by politicians and media personalities who, for agendas of their own, they want to slow the recovery from the pandemic. They want to hurt the president. They want to hurt the president's party, Frum said. Frum defended his tweets, where he first suggested unvaccinated patients be a lower priority. And he said he wasn't writing a management suggestion of hospital emergency rooms. He was only expressing his frustrations against people who choose to remain unvaccinated from the coronavirus. He says, I was trying to give a voice to the inaudible frustration that people who've been doing the right thing feel towards people who are doing the wrong thing. On Sunday, he listed several steps the country could take to combat the coronavirus, and one of them, he suggested, is let hospitals quietly triage emergency care to serve the unvaccinated last. Best option. Number 1, keep encouraging vaccines and boosters. 2, impose vaccine mandates where it can be done. 3, otherwise return to normal as fully as we can, especially the schools. And 4, let hospitals quietly triage emergency care to serve the unvaccinated last. He voiced frustration further by calling out unvaccinated people to stop acting as victims. I mean, look, I kind of agree with him in many ways. I don't personally think that you should treat the unvaccinated last, because invariably the unvaccinated are going to be the most in need, and I believe the most in need should be cared for first. But I also recognize that if you have brought this upon yourself, if you have chosen to be unvaccinated, then you kind of get what you deserve. I vaccinated my daughter a week ago. She's had no side effects, not a solitary side effect. She'll get her second dose on December the 29th. She'll then be fully vaccinated against coronavirus. And as a parent, I will not have to worry about her. Sure, she could get sick, but she won't, hopefully, be hospitalized. David Frum also wrote, reading the reactions to this tweet, I am impressed by the immense self-pity of the anti-vaxxers, who see themselves as bottomless victims, even as their own bad choices deny hospital care to so many others in desperate need. He said, at this point, if you are still unvaccinated, you are not a victim. You are a cause of the victimization of vulnerable others. He makes a good point, just nobody really wanted to say it, and he has. You know? I mean, we're living in this weird world, divisive world. And in fact, it's not world, because this is really exclusive to America. I mean, please don't think this is happening all over the world, you know? Most civilized countries, the majority of people, you know, upwards of 85%, are getting vaccinated without questioning it. They've vaccinated like over 5 or 6 billion people now on this planet. I quite like David Frum as well. I actually find him to be very comedic in many ways. Doesn't really say anything more in this article that isn't said in the other one, to be honest, that I can see. He says, in a weekend thread, he laid out his strategy to end the COVID-19 pandemic. He said, so the practical political choice is keep schools and businesses on the present hobbled footing indefinitely, or return to normal as boosters become available to all, accepting the inherent risks of normal in a 30% unvaxxed society. You want to fulminate against the dumb-ass malignity of the anti-vaxxers and their quietly personal vaxxed media and political enablers. Go ahead. I do it myself almost every day right here in this space. He asked rhetorically what should be done with the unvaccinated Americans whom he referred to as the malignant minority, which is not yielding to reason anytime soon. And he quickly answered his own question with 4 points. The last one, let hospitals quietly triage emergency care to serve the unvaccinated last. I mean, this is the thing, all the Fox News hosts are vaccinated. They have to be to work at Fox News. And yet they're peddling this propaganda that there's something bad about it. And look, I have a friend who was discussing with her husband about whether or not they should vaccinate the kids for flu. The kids have had COVID vaccines, but they're discussing if they should vaccinate the kids for flu. And the kind of conclusion was, or not the conclusion, the husband says, well, I've read this book that this Democrat's written saying that actually, it's really bad to vaccinate children. And anyway, this whole thing, and so she said to me, what do you think about this? And I said, well, who's the book by? Turns out the book is by Robert Kennedy Jr. And famously, Robert Kennedy Jr. is the original source of anti-vaccination in the US when it comes to COVID-19 and other vaccines. He is he the nephew of John F. Kennedy? I think so. Yeah, that's right. I think John F. Kennedy was his uncle. Anyway, he has traded on the Kennedy name to spew misinformation about COVID-19 from the very beginning. He got banned from Instagram. He's been banned from various platforms. The guy is a pure conspiracy theorist. And yet, because he is a Democrat or from a famous Democrat family, there are regular people now who are quite sane and sound of mind who are reading this book and hearing his nonsense and thinking that it must be true. There is it's like it is so simple to people that they think that if Democrats are saying it, and they're Democrat, then that must be the truth. And it doesn't work like that. It just doesn't work like that. So here we are. This is what we're dealing with. We're dealing with misinformation on a level that has literally not been seen before. And it's being done by people who have a reputation for, speaking the truth. Taking advantage of their position and spreading misinformation. Let's move on to Kentucky Fried Chicken. Before we do that, let me tell you that Volley has a growing list of shows, including Haley and Allison Live, waking you up in the morning with lots of laughs, and their one-star cinema review. Or Live Every Day with Liv Harrison, live from Texas, celebrating the little things in life with plenty of coffee. Yes. Or what about the charming and funny Hal Rudnick, who his program Your Pal Hal follows this show in about 10 minutes' time. Okay, let's jump on to what is set to become the greatest topic you've ever heard me talk about here. Colonel Sanders, Colonel Harlan Sanders, to be precise, the American founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, has died at 90 years of age. Oh, no, sorry, he died in 1980. I was going to say, that guy's doing well. Does that mean that the guy in the commercials is an actor? Unbelievable. I mean, this is a big part of American culture. It really is. It's a big deal. Wow. Just looking at a photograph of him from 1974, like the real Colonel Sanders. He looks exactly like the cartoon on the bucket. It's amazing. It's beautiful. When Harlan Sanders first began to serve meals to truck drivers at an old family dining room, table-wheeled, to the front of his Corbin, Kentucky service station in 1930, fried chicken was not on the menu because it took too long to prepare. His country ham and steak dinners proved so popular that he soon opened Sanders Cafe across the street and began to serve chicken fried in an iron skillet. Food critic Duncan Hines included the restaurant in his 1935 Road Food Guide, and it was there in 1939 that the Colonel used pressure cookers to perfect his quick-frying chicken coated in his secret recipe of 11 herbs and spices. Sorry, this is making me very hungry. Oh, God, that batter. That batter. The Colonel's fried chicken first became a fast food hit in an unlikely location, Salt Lake City, Utah. It was there in 1952 that Pete Harmon, a Sanders friend who operated one of the city's largest restaurants, became the Colonel's first franchisee. According to Ozersky, the Harmon restaurant pioneered the famous bucket container and used the Kentucky Fried Chicken moniker. What most people associate with worldwide fast food today looked like a regional specialty on a menu in the 1950s. Sanders was 65 and reliant on $105 a month in Social Security check when he incorporated Kentucky Fried Chicken and began driving his 1946 Ford around the country, signing up new franchisees. After selling the company, the Colonel sued Kentucky Fried Chicken for $122 million. That's the one I'm using, Carla. That's the one I'm using. Yes, I scrolled past him delivering babies because it made me feel a bit sick. But it says he sold Kentucky Fried Chicken in 1964, and after food conglomerate Hublin purchased the company in 1971, the cantankerous Colonel began to deride the chain's gravy as slop, its owners as a bunch of booze hounds. And although still the public face of the company, Sanders also so disliked Kentucky Fried Chicken's food that he developed plans to franchise the Colonel's Lady Dinner House restaurant, which he opened with his wife in Shelbyville in Kentucky in 1968 as a competitor. When Hublin threatened to block the plan, Sanders sued for $122 million. The two sides settled out of court with Sanders receiving $1 million and a chance to give a cooking lesson to the executives in return for his promise to stop criticizing Kentucky Fried Chicken's food. The renamed Claudia Sanders Dinner House was allowed to remain open and is still in operation. Isn't that lovely? Apparently he swore like a sailor, the epitome of a southern gentleman. His language was notoriously salty. Well, kind of similar to his French fries. The guy was clearly a maverick, but this is what we were saying at the very beginning of the show about people like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. They all like to swear, these guys. They're all like, they're just individuals. They're unique. And it's their uniqueness that gives them the drive and the passion to do something crazy. In the case of Colonel Sanders, to franchise Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I'll be honest with you, I think it's very impressive. And I think that if you're the kind of person who has got an entrepreneurial spirit and an energy about you that is marketable, then go for it. The world is your lobster. Thanks for joining me. Your pal Hal is next. See you tomorrow at 9.